I think the nudges are always with us. The nudges are always there, and I call them the soul sparks, those moments when you get stopped in your track because you just know that the universe, God, source, creator is trying to tell you something. And I think the work that I did was, I'm not going to dismiss it. I am not going to keep talking about what could go wrong. I want to start talking about what could go wondrously, amazingly, beautifully right in this world.
What was the number one thing that allowed you to move past staying in that old version of you and to fully, because it was a new version of you, it was a new Deepika, to really go into that?
I think for me, it was the awareness of really being able to tune into yourself and understand what I really wanted. Everything down enough to hear what I wanted to do. It was actually pretty clear. It was just that your inner hater is alive and well, telling you all the reasons you can't do that. I've made a decision that anything I think of is absolutely, totally, and completely possible for me, and I can move in that direction.
Today on the podcast, I am so incredibly excited for two reasons. First reason is we have our very first interview. So the Manifested with Kathleen Cameron podcast has never interviewed anyone before. So today is our first interview. And the second thing I'm so excited about is that this interview is a very, very powerful story that is going to impact you positively. And her name is Deepika Sandhu. And you've heard her name before. I've talked about her on the podcast. So we're going to have her today to talk about manifestation, Hello Universe, It's Me, Soul Sparks Press, and hopefully give you a little bit of understanding of how she's done some of the things that she's done, so you can make some of these changes in your life yourself. So welcome, Deepika, my first guest. I am so, so excited to have you. So we have been working together for 2 years, I think it's been, and it has been a wild 2 years. So I just want to start out by asking, 2 years ago, when you came into my world and into my energy, where were you at? And what was the feeling of who Deepika was then? Well,
Deepika was, by any objective measure, extremely successful. Deepika was at the top of her game, partner with a Silicon Valley based law firm, working with all of the tech companies that are probably on your phone right now, helping to take companies public, making good money. I had already released my first book, and I was moving into a space of trying to understand if the things that I was doing from a creative perspective could truly become my full life. So she was pretty great 2 years ago. She certainly was, but
highly, highly successful.
Highly successful, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so when we met, I remember we started this conversation about you wanting to be fully self-employed. And I know that at that time, it was like this vision of what you wanted. And now you're sitting here and you're living it. Yeah. So I would love for you to tell people what has happened or shifted over the past 2 years. What were some of the big decisions that you had to make to do that?
Yeah, I had hit a point where I knew that whatever I had done in my corporate career, there wasn't anything else I wanted to do there. So it was no longer, or it wasn't a story about wanting to escape corporate life or that I hated corporate or I had to release it. It wasn't that conversation, but it really was an internal conversation of I have truly done everything that I've set out to do in corporate. And there's this other thing brewing and happening and wanting to have more of my attention. And could it actually rise up and be the source of my income and my livelihood? Or did I need to keep holding on to my corporate experience for some reason? So that thinking to level out did require a lot of different decisions along the way. But mostly I think it required a belief, right? A belief that money comes to me, not through a payroll manager at a job, right?
Yes, that is a huge difference in thinking and a huge shift in belief. I remember I used to believe that like having a paycheck and having a boss and getting paid every 2 weeks was safety. Yeah. And that entrepreneurship wasn't necessarily, because are we sure the money's going to come? So what type of belief did you have to instill in yourself about entrepreneurship for you to take that leap?
I think it was, what does success actually mean? So I had a belief that success was having the corporate job, getting promoted, making more and more money, and continuing to rise up through the ranks. And I did that with like an A+, right? Like I had that definition of success down. And then you layer onto that the definition of success that you've got the house, you've got the husband, you've got the kid, you've got the life, the cars, great vacations, nice purses, everything posted on social media for everybody to see. These were my definitions of success, right?
So what I actually hear you saying is, you have to create your own definition of success and to build a life based on what you would love. And so some of you might love working for others and have a job and beautiful, but you been there, done that, did what you wanted to do. You wanted to expand past it. So I remember when we talked about it, when we first talked about you moving out of the corporate and into entrepreneurship, we put like a date in the calendar of when it would potentially happen. And then when you finally made that decision, what was the number one thing that allowed you to move past staying in that old version of you and to fully, because it was a new version of you, it was a new Deepika, to really go into that. So what did you believe or tell yourself or define for yourself that had you be able to do that for those that are listening?
I think for me, it was the awareness of really being able to tune into yourself and understand what I really wanted. For so much of my life, I think I was inundated with what other people wanted for me, what society, social media, teachers, parents, Hollywood, Bollywood says it would take to create a wondrous life. And by those definitions, I had done all of those things. But when I really slowed everything down enough to hear what I wanted to do, it was actually pretty clear. Right? It was just that your inner hater is alive and well telling you all the reasons you can't do that. If I were truly to change my life and to go from corporate to running my own business, well, how would I get any clients? Or why would people want to work with me? Or how would you ever make the same kind of money? Or, oh my God, what will your daughter do? Where will you get your health insurance from? And somehow those thoughts become these, chains, shackles, right? In our ability to be free with our choices. But I think once I had the awareness that I was allowed to ask myself truly what I wanted, not only to hear the answer, but then to allow that answer to come into fruition in my 3D reality, that is when everything actually changed for me.
But when you actually went into entrepreneurship and made that decision, I created the most empowering beliefs I could have. Like I was like, no, entrepreneurship is safer than working for anybody else. And of course, everybody's going to want to sign up for the thing that I'm offering, So I didn't go into it with the fears, worries, and doubts. I went into it with like a really intentional programmed belief system that had me thrive.
I don't know that I did that. You know what I think I did? Which that would be good. That would have been better probably than what I was actually doing. But I think what I did is the universe said, you can't make your own decisions. I'm going to make it for you.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole idea behind Soul Sparks Press landed in a conversation where somebody says, Deepika, if you write that book with me, I'll do it. And I said, let's go. So let's break that down for a second. What was that? That was the awareness enough for me to hear that the universe was giving me a soul spark, that there was somebody out there who believed in me that much that they said, I want to do this with you. And for me to respond back to say, let's go, and not let my inner hater say, you don't know how to do this. How would you ever do this? Was everybody going to pay you? What's going to happen there? Do you think you can actually get this done? That voice wasn't even around anymore. But that takes time, right? To quiet down that inner critic, that inner hater that we all have within us. It's not an overnight thing. So I wish I could say it was that I had reprogrammed myself into very empowering beliefs and more intentionally stepped into entrepreneurship. But I think what happened more is the seed was planted that could I create this as my full-time life? Could this book, could all of this be something full-time in my world? That seed was planted, but the how of it, I did not know how it was coming or what it was even fully going to be.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want to actually ask you about too, because when the decision was made for you to go into entrepreneurship full-time and you were going to leave the corporate career, you didn't have this step-by-step plan. You didn't even have the vessel or vehicle. You were doing something else. You had a side coaching business and we could feel some resistance around that and we weren't quite sure that was the path. And so you continued on towards this idea or this dream of entrepreneurship without knowing the how, and you let your intuition and the universe guide you
100%.
Into Soul Sparks Press, which is here now. So for people that aren't listening necessarily or tuned in or aware of their intuition, how did you follow those nudges?
I think the nudges are always with us, right? The nudges are always there. And I call them the soul sparks, those moments when you get stopped in your track because you just know that the universe, God, source, creator is trying to tell you something. But even in those moments, the moment a cute little puppy crosses your path or a little flower falls, near you, or a petal comes into your awareness, whatever it is that is your soul spark in that moment, we are so quick to dismiss it. And I think the work that I did was, I'm not going to dismiss it. I am not going to keep talking about what could go wrong. I want to start talking about what could go wondrously, amazingly, beautifully right in this world. So for me, there was training on little soul sparks all along the way, from leaving a marriage, from starting over from scratch, from writing a book, from publishing that book. None of those things were like, oh yeah, this is so great, I'll just go do this next, I'll go do that next. No, they took the nudges from the universe to get there. So I think the training on listening to what the universe is trying to tell us has been happening for some time. But even when we listen, we don't always act on it, right?
Oh yeah. It's the acting on the intuition.
Yeah.
That's the most powerful. I think self-trust is huge. And I know that was one of the things that we had worked on. One of your words was self-trust, which is powerful. So just to close the loop on this transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, what has happened with your company? Okay. Don't hold back here. I want you to be really show people that when you are aligned and you're following the intuitive hits and you're taking action, what kind of outcome shows up for you?
Well, you end up 9 months later with 40 authors, writing books, and your first book being released. I am your first podcast guest, and you were my first official release from Soul Sparks Press, hitting #1. So this is what happens, right? That you follow the nudges, you go where it takes you, and you end up truly creating something that is magnetic in every possible way. The first 25 or so authors we got without any social media posts, without any advertising. We didn't have a website up, literally nothing. It was just word of mouth and just traveling in the most beautiful of ways. So I think when the universe wants something to come into existence through you, it will. And when I look back, this is not the planned thing I was working on, like you said, but it is absolutely the most aligned thing I could have ever been doing. It makes perfect sense. I was the little girl with the journals, right? Writing all the time, all her preteen angst, writing for the school paper, writing in college, writing blogs, starting book projects, never finishing them. It is no wonder today that I get to be this vessel for all these amazingly wonderful stories to come to life.
Yeah. And I think she's being a little bit modest, but she is exploding and she's doing fantastic. And it's all because you're using that God essence within to move the energy towards an idea that is making your soul so happy and you're so aligned with it. And Soul Sparks Press is now a company that I'm partnered with and will continue to partner with without a shadow of a doubt. And we re-released the Kindle of Best of Yourself and the paperback. And it went #1 bestseller, I think, for 6 days straight.
6 days.
6 days. Deepika and I have very powerful manifestation energy together. That's what we've learned here.
Yeah.
And then we have some other projects coming up too, so you guys can pay attention to that too. And then the Audible of Best of Yourself. But I want to just talk a little bit about Hello Universe, It's Me.
Yeah.
So this is your book. It is phenomenal. Tell them the tagline, because I love it. I absolutely love it.
How I scheduled a breakdown, manifested a new life, and how you can too.
So why don't you give them just a little bit of an overview about what this book specifically is about?
Look, I found myself at 40, having done everything right, like I said, checking every box, doing everything anybody ever says you should do to have an exceedingly successful life. Yet I found myself crying in my closet, sobbing, like the ugly sob, like with the snot coming out in the ratty-tatty pajamas. Like it was ugly, right?
Yeah.
Side note, I don't know why there's so many stories about women crying in their closets, but I think it's the only quiet space we have in our own homes, right? To hide and to let it all out. But I had the question, why? If I had done everything right, why did everything feel so wrong? And I had the awareness even then that, okay, I'm not just going to drink more wine to cover this up, right? I'm not just going to shop more to numb myself. I'm not just going to dream more about George Clooney and my alternative universe with him, which really did get me through a lot of years, but even that couldn't continue to persist, right?
Yeah.
I had to make a decision in that moment. The decision I made is that I wasn't going to wake up at 50 feeling the same way I felt at 40. So I scheduled a breakdown because I could not be like Julia Roberts and just take off to Italy or India or wherever the heck she goes.
You had to make sure it fit in the calendar.
I had to get it in my calendar.
Time.
Yeah. I needed a scheduled breakdown. So I picked June, and I did allow myself to release from my life for that month the things that I didn't want to do anymore, right? So I decided I wasn't working. I wasn't going to be checking email. I wasn't going to be, socializing with people I didn't want to socialize with. I wasn't going to host parties just to make it look good that I could host a bunch of parties.
Yeah.
I took away all the noise from my day and I replaced it with things that I knew I would love. Sitting at a coffee shop, just staring out the window with nothing to do, going to yoga in the middle of the day, painting. I learned to paint during this time too. But most importantly, just loving up on the parts of my life that I did love, especially being with my daughter and our rides to school every day, all of that. That was my scheduled breakdown. And I now say, this was, my future self was like, clapping their hands, cheering me on, so excited that I had found myself in that moment because they were all waiting for me to get the epiphanies and the downloads and the information about how life needed to change for me. So in Hello Universe, I share that journey and I share how you can also schedule your breakdown, assess this life. I also say you don't have to break down because I already did, right? And then I'll clue you in on the ways you can do this without actually going to it. But even if you look at things like the pandemic, the Los Angeles fires, this is everything slowing us all the way down so that we can go within and understand, well, wait a second, what is it that I really want? What is it that really matters to me? And that's the story of Hello Universe, it's me.
Yeah, and I think what matters the most, what everyone is starting to realize is the relationship that you hold with yourself and the relationship that you hold with others is the most important. And it far surpasses any of the material things, the physical things in our life. They don't have as much significance and value, but being true to yourself matters most. So this podcast is all about, I called it Manifested Podcast because everything is already manifested. And so Deepika, you are, along with myself, one of the most powerful manifestors out there for sure. I have experienced it. And in our 2 years working together, you have been willing to do the work and to go within and to ask the questions and to expand. So what would you say would be the biggest contributing factor, the biggest thing that you've done with yourself that has helped you to manifest some of these successes, the books, the #1 bestsellers, you've been on TV, you're filming a movie. I mean, you have a lot of good stuff going on right now. And so what would you say the work that you've done on your consciousness to make that happen?
I've decided it's all possible. I've made a decision that anything I think of is absolutely, totally, and completely possible for me, and I can move in that direction. I spent so much of my life thinking things were possible professionally, but maybe not possible in every aspect of my life. But if you look at my life today, I like to call it my extraordinarily ordinary life, right? 1 minute I'm shooting a podcast with you. 1 minute I'm filming a movie. And the next minute I'm home just walking my dog, picking up poop with my daughter, And that's exactly the way I want it. I want to live an extraordinarily ordinary existence, like in the most beautiful sense that those words could ever evoke for anyone. And I can only do that by deciding that everything that comes into my existence is possible. It's possible to leave a marriage. It's possible to have $0 in your bank account and recover from that. It is possible to write a book that everybody is telling you not to publish, right? It is possible for that book to keep opening door after door after door. It is possible to do TV shows. It's possible to do movies. And it's possible to love this life. And that is 100% the space that I'm in right now.
Oh, she's lighting me on fire. I'm like, what else is possible? Let's go do it. So what is on the docket for you for 2025, 2026? Like, what is coming next for for Deepika and Soul Sparks Press?
We have assembled an amazing cadre of authors already, right? We have a beautiful collection of sweepingly inspirational stories that are going to come to life this year, and they're coming out one after the other. And I cannot be more thrilled to bring all of these stories to life. So you're going to see them coming out at your local bookstores, on Amazon, on Apple Books, all throughout the year. But we also have this beautiful collection of authors, and I think continuing to figure out how to elevate their own platforms. I always say I just went first, right? So every other author can see what they can do with their books and their stories. And that's what we're here to do, is continue to create those platforms for our authors to create more and more soul sparks in more and more ways.
Yeah, and I think the most beautiful thing that I hear when you talk about this, when you talk about Soul Sparks Press and the mission and the vision and what you want to do, it's about helping people to tap into that little spark in their soul to help them then expand, grow into a version of themselves that tells their story, that influences the rest of the world. So this is so beautiful. I love books. I love reading. Obviously, I love writing them too. And I think they're just such a way for us to live on and have our legacy live long past us. Our stories will remain long past we are here. And if those stories can be read in 100 years from now and somebody be inspired by that and take action and move from it, I think that is so incredibly beautiful. So Deepika, I want to thank you for coming. It has been a beautiful 2 years working alongside you, and this is the beginning of a new relationship for us, a new iteration of where we are headed. I'm so proud to call you a dear friend of mine as well, and for us to manifest all of the extraordinary, ordinary things in our lives going forward. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, being my first guest, sharing your story and inspiring this audience. And for everybody watching, please do not forget that the limit does not exist.